What we have here is a typical Najdorf Sicilian, where black is taking control of the b file with this b4 rook, and all he really wants out of this position is to eventually get the rook on h8 to b8 and support the attack on the king.
Mhm.
However, he is facing his own problems on his own king side with the g5 pawn. We can see that our knight is currently under attack. If we look at the little bit of analysis, we'll see that after knight to d7, it fails to f takes e6, compromising our entire center, and all of our pieces are bad after knight takes
We're
e6.
also down a pawn, and the light squares are really weak.
Exactly. What happens if we move our knight to g8? Well, our bishop is now able to defend the e6 pawn, true, but our knight on g8 and knight and rook on h8 are so passive that it's almost better to lose the entire center.
White is going to be attacking with all of his pieces. In the Sicilian, you cannot play down on activity. You can play down on material for activity.
Exactly. So, with no good moves for the knight, but a dream on the b file, you have to ask yourself, why be scared of white taking our knight? Why not just activate our pieces and move the king? If we castle kingside, we're getting closer to moving our rook to the b8 square. And if white tries to take our knight, we don't say, why'd you take our knight? You're hurting. We wanted that knight. We say, no, thank you for taking our knight. Thank you for activating our bishop for free. Now the bishop on f6 is at least worth 6 points. It controls the entire long diagonal, points at white's king, and soon black will be able to activate the f8 rook to b8 with almost unstoppable attack.
I would like to add, this position is not at all easy to solve. Grandmaster Lev Pakus, who was 2,600 plus FIDE at his peak, failed to find this move for black, and he was playing white. Second of all, I had a national master friend of mine try to solve this position. I told him that it was something exceptional, and he spent 5+ minutes and could not even consider the move. This is very difficult, but black has good long-term compensation because he has far more attackers than the opponent has defenders on the king side. And I'd like to point out that all of the weaknesses are on the dark squares, which are weaker in the long run because white is lacking a dark squared bishop and has put all of his pawns on light squares.
On to the next position.
This is a typical Scotch position. The e5 pawn is a weakness. There's an x-ray against the queen, which means that the d5 knight is not being targeted yet. We would like to take the e5 pawn, but we can't do so immediately because of knight f6 check winning the queen. So we have to think about different ways to target this pawn. One of which is bishop g7, targeting the pawn directly, and the other is castle's queenside, which is avoiding the discovered attacks. If we play bishop g7 though, I'm not liking that white has knights bishop g5, queen takes e5, knight c5, where the b7 bishop is, a6 bishop is targeted, and all of white's pieces are becoming very active very quickly. I think white has good compensation here. So as a result of this, I would prefer to play castle's queenside. I would prefer to postulate my king, making it much safer and including the rook in the attack either through e8 or later after knight b6, d5, targeting the king in the center.
But Elijah, what happens if white skewers our queen and our rook?
You mean what happens if white postulates his bishop?
True.
Okay, so if white postulates his bishop, one postulate's great and all, but we have 3 consecutive postulates, you see. So after queen takes e5, bishop takes d8, we have bishop b4 check, king d1, and rook takes d8. And the postulated piece is no more, but all of ours remain. All of our pieces are attacking, and we've only given up, we've sacrificed the exchange for only 1 pawn. Well, no. Is it really 5? Is the rook 5 and the minor piece is 3? No, the rook is 5 and the minor pieces are 3.5 when you're talking about exchange sacrifices. Because the minor pieces are active in the middle game, and they're controlling the center, they're developed, and the rooks usually don't have open files yet, or very many of them. So therefore, the minor pieces should be counted as 3.5 pawns. For more details, see Positional Chess Sacrifices by Mihai Suba. So white should avoid bishop g5 and play something like queen c2, preparing to take the knight, and black has multiple good continuations here, but simplest is just knight b4 and preparing to reroute the knight. The e5 pawn is still a target, the white king is still in the center, and black would be having a better position.
That concludes this position.
This is a well-known Bobby Fischer game where Fischer was playing black, and this is a typical Sicilian. In a lot of Sicilians, white will play bishop g5, bishop takes f6, giving the bishop pair, which means that black can afford to weaken the h6 square because white doesn't have a dark square bishop anymore. Black is behind in development. White's pieces are becoming pretty active, and if black doesn't activate all of his pieces, what is he doing? So the real question is, can you castle? Well, what? How can you castle? There's like a half-open file here. Maybe g5's happening one day. But the real question is, who cares? If you castle, in a lot of these positions are typical. Because, first of all, the weak squares are dark squares, and black has a dark squared bishop and white doesn't. And second of all, there's an open file. After king h8 and rook g8, suddenly black is the one using the open file, and admittedly, white can try to fight for it too, but these situations are typical, even in Sicilians, but also, and especially so, in situations where both sides castle on the same side. Black has easy play also. He's going to play bishop d7, he's going to play b4. I'm not claiming he has a better position or even that he's fully equal, but that this is black's best chance and that black and many strong masters have chosen to play this position. Bobby Fischer said in his book, My 60 Memorable Games, Petrosian and Tal happened to stroll by the board at this instant. Petrosian made a wry face with look to me. Can black do this and live? But Bobby Fischer knows best, of course, and he chose the ugly castling. By the way, I'm calling it ugly castling based on Grandmaster Gregory Serper's article Ugly Castling on chess.com, where he shows this to be typical. And it is so typical that I've seen situations where even AlphaZero is doing it in non-standard situations. For more details, see Grandmaster Matthew Sadler's book, Game Changer.
You know what they say, Elijah? Spartan kings never won a battle by being scared.
And that concludes this position. What is the obvious move in this position? You castle, of course, onto the open file, as we've already discussed. Now, you may think, oh, but this open file is risky, right? Actually, the main advantage in these positions is the open file because we'll be getting the rook to it first. And very rarely is white able to exploit this in the short term because he's already exchanged his dark squared bishop, the one that could use these squares, by taking on f6. These situations are often followed up with some sort of f5, f4 to open the king side, and black will finish his development as well. Black just played bishop takes e3, and white is forced to recapture with his king. White is currently up a piece, but his king is on e3. What's going on here? Well, the real question is, who cares? Black will take on d4, and white has to decide where to go with his king. The obvious decision for students of the king postulate might be king f4, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. We don't need to go that far yet. We're up a piece. We can play king d2, and after they take on e5, we can play king c1. We have now artificially castled our king that's behind its pawn wall, and we're going to target the weak dark squares soon, which are weak because black does not have a dark square bishop, and white has a significant advantage. Black has some pawns for the piece, but his king is actually more of a target than our king right now, especially in view of our lead in development.
That might be true, Elijah, but I don't know about you. I like to take my king on promenades. You can save your artificial castling whenever you're trying to defend. I want to attack. If king f4, black has d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, king takes e5. I am going in for the kill. If black tries to defend with f6, I take with the knight. Now, black is barely holding on with perfect play. With king to e7, queen takes d4, queen a5 check, winning back the piece, unfortunately. However, once I retreat my king and you win back that knight, I'm going to postulate my rook to d1 and claim the whole d file. Now, with sufficient activity, I can play for the win.
White's playing for a win because he's a better pawn structure and he has better activity. And as what Sean was saying about I like to take my king for promenades, this saying is attributed to Nimzovich, who was known for his eccentric king play. And later on, world champions Petrosian and Karpov were also king postulate specialists. Now that concludes this position.
So here we have a position that almost didn't make the cut for the course, but it's such a classic position, and it includes the king fianchetto. We thought we had to include it. So analyzing the position for white, you'll notice that we have some pretty strong pieces in the center, such as the e1 rook. However, our king is very weak on d2. And whenever you have a weak king that's in the center, think, what's the fastest way we can get it to a safe spot? And here, with king to c3, we are threatening to put the king on b2 behind its safe umbrella of the a, b, and c pawns. And this would actually create an artificial castle. Now, black, knowing that this is a threat, decides he's going to try to destroy our umbrella by moving c4. Now, if we take back with the pawn, we'll see that black has a very clear attack on our king. We no longer have the safety of the umbrella, and we have to run the other direction. If we go king b2 right now, black is able to support the c-pawn with d5. Now, with a little bit of slow play and building up the black pieces, he's going to have an eventual attack on our king, and we're not feeling that safe.
It's playable for white, but we can do better than that.
We can do much better for white. So instead of retreating the queen or taking with the pawn, why don't we consider taking with the king?
The real question is, who cares?
Exactly. After king takes c4, black has two moves. Bishop to a6 check, and queen to a5.
Let's discuss bishop a6 check first. After bishop a6 check, we have king c3. And black no longer has the pawn lever because he's already pushed c4. We're going to be totally safe with king b2, and this extra pawn is really useful. Plus, black's king isn't exactly the safest, and he's not going to be able to castle it so easily. White will develop all of his pieces. So black should play queen a5, therefore preventing the thematic king fianchetto and preparing bishop a6, which right now would be checkmate. So what do? We run away. We are going to try to castle by hand. So what is black going to do? He's going to try to stop us. Bishop a6 check, c4, d5. Well, what do? We just keep running with the king. They take the pawn. Who cares? Their king's the one in the center now. If we run away, they're giving us these open files to attack their king with. So king f1, c takes b3, king g1. And so white's going to be down material, but with the initiative against the king in the center. White could play b takes a2, black could play b takes a2, and after knight b2, there's excellent compensation here, but white can do even better than that by playing for tactics. Queen c2, taking advantage of the pin, the king in the center, I would add, and there would be tactics against the king and the rook. There would be queen e6 check and takes on a8, so let's say black takes on a1. This isn't best. He should play king f7. More castling by hand, except it's a little harder for black here because this bishop's in the way, so we would just develop our pieces, and we have strong compensation for a pawn, targeting the d5 bishop, and all of our pieces are active while black is still having the king in the center and struggling with his development. White would have a better game. But let's say black decides to win material and put another queen on the board. Well, then after we take on c6, again, taking advantage of the pinned knight, they'll play king f7, queen e6. We want to repeat one, so then we take on b1, and we have incredible compensation for a piece here. We're actually crushing. White has a winning attack due to his initiative. This position came from the world champion Anand's preparation for a world championship match against Gelfand, as described by the excellent book, The Anand Files. Yes, Anand was planning to play king c3, king takes c4. These world champions and their king postulates, eh? They really know their stuff. Bit much for most people, but this is what we're learning.
And that concludes this position. So I think it's pretty obvious in this position that black has some very good pieces. The e2 pawn is right next to the promotion square. The black queen on e5 along with the bishop are pointed directly at white's king. And black's rook on e6 is helping support the e2 pawn and will be critical in the endgame to help promote it. However, we have one problem here in this position. You might think that it's black's king is weak. Not really. I think it's because black's king is not castled.
Right, and so what is the obvious solution then? We clearly castle the king. So what we do is we play king g4, and white doesn't really have anything he can do against the very simple and rather obvious plan of king f5, king takes g6, king f7, and king g8. Also the classic zigzag. Queen g1 check, king f5, queen f2, king g6, rook g1, king f7, rook e1, king g8, and white resigned. He's down material, he's down 2 pawns, black's pieces are dominant, and as you would expect from the starting position, white's king is in danger. So this was a famous game by former world champion Tigran Petrosian, positional mastermind. He was also very good he was known for his defense. And as you would expect from a positional master and master of defense, like Karpov, he was known for his king walks, as confirmed by Grandmaster Lev Pakis. And if you want more information on such things, you could consult Watson's excellent Secrets of Modern Chess Strategy.
And that just goes to show, Elijah, before you try to attack, make sure to castle your king.
Steinitz was also a master of defense. He thought the king could take care of himself, and he, of course, did many famous king walks.
And that concludes this position.
Well, what do we recapture with? The queen? No, that'd be silly. We recapture with the king.
Exactly. But I thought in chess, Elijah, that the rules state once you move your king can no longer castle.
Sorry, that's outdated. We're going to show you how we castle in these positions.
Exactly. Rules are meant to be broken.
So Queen as Bareyev would say, to reach the elite in chess, you not only need to know the rules, you need to also learn the exceptions. But although, as we'll see from this course, many elite players are missing the king postulate. Okay, black plays queen h6 check. You may think that after queen e4, they'll win the rook. This is why we prefer to postulate the king. It's because we have this counter queen c2, as now the king would protect that square. It's a double attack on queen e4 and queen c8. So and this would also be a skewer on their rook. So black cannot safely take the rook, and in the endgame, white would not only have a space advantage and easy development, but the king activity would be in white's favor.
You know what they say, Elijah? The king postulate prepares the queen postulate.
Yes, exactly. So queen h6 check, king c3. Now, maybe this move isn't so obvious. I mean, it isn't obvious. Grandmaster Hare recommended King E1 in his French toast course on Chessable, and King E1's okay, but it's a little passive, don't you think? Don't you think the king is an attacking piece that can take care of itself? What have we learned from our predecessors? Have we not studied our Steinitz, Nimzovich, Petrosian, and Karpov? No, no, we charge ahead. Plus, over here, it's not even that safe. It's like, the center could, like, there's an open file nearby. There's a lot of action will happen there. We'd rather go where it's safer on c3. More specifically, there will be a possible castling, just a little slower, but it's just okay. You have to be patient in chess, and that's why we play King c3. So they want to take advantage. They think we're being a bit hasty, right? They're like, you played the king postulate. You must be ridiculous. You're out of your mind. We're gonna try to punish you. This Sean knows this. His grandmaster opponents in fast chess are always trying to punish the king postulate, but it's a lot stronger than you may think, and they don't know that it's common because nobody's covering this in any of chess literature except in small sub portions of obscure areas. So King c3, knight takes e5. So they can just develop, but then we can just exchange the queens. And again, the king is active in the endgame is a good thing, and we have a space advantage. And space advantages are best exploited in minor piece endgames, as explained by Gelfand positional decision making in chess.
And since we're missing the dark squared bishop here, we need a piece to pick up the slack, and that's exactly what the king can do in the center.
Yes, we also have the dark pawns to take care of that. So we're going to have a really good bishop here because all the pawns are on the opposite color, and black's bishop is going to be restricted. I would like to remind readers that Capablanca's rule, that is, when you have only one bishop, you want to put your pawns on opposite color of your bishop so that they're complementing each other, applies mainly to central pawns because that is where the mobility will be determined. Okay, so black tries to punish us, but they don't know their principles. Otherwise, why do they think they could punish us for just playing an ordinary king postulate, right? So d takes e5, queen e3, queen d3, queen takes e5, king b3, castles. Okay, they have two pawns for a piece. They're okay. They're developed. But our king is safe enough, and we're going to continue development. And if black is accurate, maybe he can drum up enough compensation, or very close to it. But white has a clear enough plan. His pieces are all flowing to good squares, and black does not have an attack. White just castled his king, and let's just remind, black has no development. So of course this is working. If black had a lot of development, of course you're going to be charging your king at the opponent's pieces. Well, sometimes you can actually do that. We're going to cover that later. But that's for more advanced students of the king postulate. Right now, we're going to just to point out black is mainly only moved his queen, and we're already close to our umbrella where we're castling on the queen side.
Yep, and that concludes this position. So in this position, black has found itself in a very precarious situation. After a series of tactical sacrifices and forced moves, black's king is directly in the center on e5. And unfortunately, white is soon approaching with a forced checkmate. If black was to make a move such as a5, white has queen to e2. After king f4, g3 check, king takes g3, queen h2, it is checkmate. Now, one way that's probably the most instinctual way for most people to try to defend this position is to go rook to f4. However, after some very precise play by white, he can once again force a win. After queen to e2, rook e4, white has double exclaim f4 check. Now, after king takes f4 forced, queen f2 check, king takes g4, queen f3 is checkmate. And you have to ask yourself in a position like this, how does one escape such a threatening checkmating pattern? I say we need to castle the king.
Yes. So right now we have a decisive material advantage if we're not getting checkmated, so we can afford to give some things back. And you may have noted that when the king was on g3 and white was supposedly checkmating us, it was because the knight was defending the f3 pawn. So we sacrificed the queen, and now material's a little bit in our favor still, but more balanced. But in the meantime, white's rook is all the way over here, and he's not going to just checkmate us with the queen. Plus, we have a very simple plan. c5, something like c5, king d5, king c6, king c7, king b8, where we have castled our king. So let's see white plays rook h1. He'd like to attack with the rook. Queen takes c7 is also possible, preventing the black from castling by hand, but after knight f7 with a counterattack, intending to follow up with bishop c6 and d5, white's pieces are discoordinated, and black's king can afford to stay around in the middle. We discussed this in more detail in the theory section, but black has so many ways of surviving with the king and often castling later on, or just even charging ahead to the queen side and starting to attack the pawns, or that we don't need to, it's besides the point, we do not need to cover it here. So let's say rook h1 trying to attack. King d5, interestingly enough, it's all black can also play knight c6, and there's other continuations where if white tries to attack, the king will charge back either to the king side or if white allows to the queen side when the queen moves, and black is perfectly fine. But let's try king d5. I mean, we're trying to follow our plan after all. So let's say they play queen d3 check, king c6, rook c1. This is a sample variation, but black is the one with a material advantage. White has to prove something. We can afford to give back a pawn here, or even two. And now material is about equal, or maybe even slightly in black's favor, but all of black's pieces are becoming very active, and the black king is safely castled, unlike the white king, who has lost the b2 pawn.
It just goes to show, even in the center of the board and without a queen, it's never too late to castle.
Exactly, and that concludes this position.